And that should start sending data, hopefully. There we go. And I should be live now. And I'm sorry about the false start. But you know how it goes. Okay. I'm just checking to make sure that everything's going okay. Okay. All right. We're about 2 minutes in, and I'm a little worried about this. So, I can't handle this right now. All right, folks, I need another check on this. Is anybody seeing me? That's all cleared up. Thank you. Okay. Let's get started. I'm terribly sorry about that. Let's get started and get going. That tells me I'm going to have to go straight Zoom in the future. So I'm going to go here. We're going to go to the PowerPoint. Again, I do want to thank the Patreon folks. I appreciate all of you, but I want to let you know that the upgrade in my tools was because of you. And so that's really exciting to me. I'm sorry about the glitch up. I now know Zoom will not end up cooperating with OBS. So it's good to know that. I also appreciate the sign up there. That lets me know that everything's going okay. We're going to get started right away here. And it's just kind of the way things ended up working. I am going to go ahead and change the aspect of my PowerPoint because my PowerPoint now will be too large for you. And so it will show falsely, and you will not be able to see what you need to see. So I'm going to go to an individual window and start the PowerPoint up the right way and do that the way it should be and go to split screen because that will allow you to see the PowerPoint correctly as opposed to incorrectly. There we go. And that will take care of everything for you so that everything is indeed cleared up and good. So we are good to go. And again, I'm showing some anomalies in our flow. So I'm going to go on and hope that this straightens out. And I'm afraid that you are not seeing the right PowerPoint because I'm not seeing the right PowerPoint, which is really, really weird. But we can fix that in just a second here. And the right PowerPoint should indeed open. The wrong PowerPoint showed itself, and I don't know why it did. But that should be up there in a second. There you go. And you don't want to see all those slides like that. I know you don't. So I'm going to go ahead and make it so that you only see the slide that you're supposed to see. rather than seeing all the slides the wrong way. And that will end up taking care of everything. There we go. And that should come up in just a second. And there we are. And you can see the cool effect here. And I hope that indeed it does show without a lot of glitching, but there's that cool sort of kind of animated effect that should indeed be working. And we are having some issues tonight. All right. Well, I'm going to keep moving on here. Those who are mods, I worry about it because people are going to be coming into stream later and they're going to see some of the bumps and some of the other things. And I kind of wish they weren't there, but that's okay. We're going to go to this neat feature called Zoom. And we're going to see a strange comparison that someone makes as far as pagan sacrifice and Jesus's death. And so, why make that? And that's something I've been encouraged to consider doing, and I really like doing it. And that's look at the comparison made, what the main points are, what is the person who is making that comparison trying to do. And there are at least two possibilities going on here. One possibility might be that he wants to discredit Christianity by casting it as just another mythology among the world's mythologies. Of course, another possibility exists with this, and we need to take that into account, and that is he wants to remove the uniqueness of the gospel so it's just an option among other gospels, being equally acceptable. Let's just be kind of Unitarian about this whole thing and end up looking at it that way. And so that could be very much part of what he's trying to do. Now, I can't get into the author's head and tell you which he's trying to do, but what I can do is just list those possibilities and then move on from there. Both of those possibilities, we're going to look at the biblical data and the in terms, we're going to just look at the biblical data and see if those are right. I mean, does the Bible support either of the possibilities related to what the individual that I'm talking about wants to do? In fact, you're going to see his little post in just a second. Um, um, Now, in order for him to make the comparison that he wants to make, and what he's doing is he put up a meme on Facebook that showed a picture of Aztec sacrifice and then said there's a religion that teaches this even today, and tried to compare God's uh, allowing Jesus to die for sin as essentially human sacrifice and the equivalency of paganism. And that's the thing he tries to do. And so we need to ask ourselves, how do you know if two things are really comparable? Logically, how can you know if you can go ahead and make something and compare it? Two things are valid to be compared if they share essential characteristics or in key features that are equivalent to each other. So they have to have key features that are equivalent to each other or share essential characteristics in order to be comparable. Now we get to see the meme. Now this is what really started the whole thing. Okay, and I want to go back for just a second so you can take a look at that meme. Okay, this was placed up on Facebook. This is a usual detractor from Facebook. And I want you to get a chance to see the meme so you can see what's going on here. Um, um, so what he does is he put this meme up on Facebook. Now, he's always posting things generally against Christianity on Facebook, but this meme really caught my attention, and I felt it needed to be dealt with. I commented on it, and the individual involved tried to ignore the comments, but I think that they're really important, and it's worth going through. And so he ended up, you can see the comparison that's kind of implied here, and we're going to get to the next slide, but he seems to be drawing some sort of some sort of comparison. There seems to be some implication in this picture, as I said, and it's relating human sacrifice, uh, which was part of pagan ritual, to Jesus' death. And that's a picture of Aztec sacrifice. So I thought, well, if we're going to make a comparison, we need to at least look at the essential characteristics of pagan human sacrifice, but in particular Aztec sacrifice. Since he decided to highlight the Aztec religion, I felt it was only proper to kind of play along. And if we're going to see if the characteristics, essential characteristics, are the same, or they share features, important features that are the same, we probably have to understand something about the Aztec religion. Now, I'm not going to claim to be an expert on the Aztec religion um, at all. Um, but I do want to comment on a little. I went to the Harvard Gazette. I mean, Harvard used to be known as a fairly intellectual institution, and I went to the Harvard Gazette because I felt as though that would be really worthwhile, since they had a bunch of articles on the Aztec religion in particular. And I thought, well, okay, since they've done the homework for me, I would go ahead and learn something about this from uh, Harvard. Why not? Why not learn something from Harvard? And so that's basically where I went. And I have that up there. And so let's talk about the Aztec religion. They have several gods, and you're seeing the slide right now. At least you should in a few minutes. The Aztec religion was primarily polytheistic. They had different gods, male and female, and the sun god, and I'm not going to try to pronounce that name because I would just botch it up, and it would really be kind of bad. There are many deities. They were revered in monthly festivals, so they had sort of a calendar of festivals um, with offerings. Well, I mean, that's a given, right? With offerings. There was a legend, and it's a dark legend. When they say a black legend, they're using it in a way that's going to be a little offensive to African Americans, but what they mean is dark. And it's funny that the Gazette should do this because Harvard is fairly liberal now. But a black legend uh, that only the Aztecs did this sort of thing, and that's not really fair. A lot of pagan religions had human sacrifices, and so I'm not going to go ahead and try to make out like the Aztec religion was the only religion that had human sacrifices. This was a way of negatively coloring things. And we'll just acknowledge that other pagan religions had that. Now, he put a meme up with the Aztec religion. Okay. Um, but we do need to talk. In the Aztecs' case, human sacrifices were meant to please the sun god. The sun god was the big thing. And the sun out here is a big thing. We've had some really nice weather lately. Um, and and the way they looked at this, now the way the Gazette looks at this, you know, so that the sun god could continue to provide for them life and warmth and uh, heat. We're going to talk about the fact that in Aztec religions, the gods actually needed these things. Now, I can't say that for all paganism, but let me just say that for the Aztec religion, that they viewed that the gods really needed these sacrifices. They believed that without human sacrifices, the sun would stop, everything would die, and that would be the end of life as we know it. So the sun had to be fed. Now remember, the reason I'm picking the Aztec religion is that he put the meme up. So he kind of went ahead and that, he may be talking about pagan religions in general, but since he put the meme up of the Aztec religion, I feel that's a really good place to start and to go through and make the comparison. The one that he seems to be making in the meme is the one we'll go with. And they honestly believed that the sun god needed those sacrifices to keep going, to live, and and to basically be fed. And if he wasn't, then the sun god would not be able to provide life and warmth and heat, and that would be really, really bad for us. They say in general, it was prisoners of war and slaves that were sacrificed. Okay, we'll give that. Okay. But a lot of people like to make out that there was only one deity that the Aztecs sacrificed to. Um, and what we're going to look at in the next few slides is it seems like a lot of their deities seem to need sacrifices. And that it wasn't just the sun god who kind of had a blood thing going, but some of the other ones did. We're also going to look at the type of ways that the sacrifices happen. Now, I mean, there's no really good way to be killed, but let's just say that you can do this more brutally and barbarically. This is the one that was made famous. I don't know, in some movies was actually kind of made famous. The priest would cut through the abdomen with a obsidian or flint knife. That's a stone knife. The heart would be torn out while still bleeding. There's beating. There's an Indiana Jones like this where there's an Indian deity that this is done to, that, still beating, held towards the sky, because, you got to show the sun god that you're going to give this offering. The body would be pushed off the pyramid because, I mean, the person's heart's cut out and they're as good as dead. And then, there was a stone that could be, where the stone could be found. And, that stone seemed to recreate a story that was part of their cosmology. All right. So we see that, not only did you die, but you didn't really get a sedative or anything. So it wasn't like lethal injection or anything of that nature. It was quite barbaric and quite nasty and not a lot of fun for the victim. Let's just be really clear here. Um, so that's where we're going. All right. And now they had a god here that, and keeping my Aztec deity straight's a little difficult. He was the senior god, um, but he was the fire god. So, I mean, how do you kill people to give them to the fire god? Well, you burn them alive. Okay. Before they died, they would be taken from the fire and their hearts would be cut out. And got a thing about the heart being cut out here. It's just the way things are. And so remember, he's drawing a parallel between Jesus' death and these particular types of rites by putting that meme up. All right. And so I want you to kind of get an idea, first of all, that there was more than one deity that seemed to be into this whole sacrificial thing. And then beyond that, um, you know, um, the method of execution was not necessarily very pleasant. And so that gives you some background on the Aztec religion and the picture that he's making the meme out of and comparing it to and saying, well, God's essentially the same as all these pagan people because he does human sacrifice too. Okay. That's my fault. There we go. Now, we're going to draw a distinction here. Now, there is some debate about this, and we need to be honest about that too. Um, but in the case of Jesus's death, we're going to see the purpose behind it. We need to look at what the Aztecs thought the purpose behind it was. It's debated that these sacrifices were ever for any sort of transgression. And I said that before, that there are scholars that feel that the Aztecs indeed did this because they had to feed the sun. Um, but was it feeding the sun and propitiation for sin? Maybe it was some sort of combination of. Um, Most of the scholars, at least that ended up, the article in the Harvard Gazette, which ended up delving into the surface of the Aztec religion, uh, said that some of the argues that there was never any sort of atonement value to these sacrifices, although they had a way of dealing with violating the gods. They would do nasty things to themselves. Okay, extreme measures, slitting their tongues for vices of speech. Their ears could be, they'd hack off their own ears. I mean, for, hearing the wrong thing, well, I got a solution. But it doesn't look like the ceremonial sacrifices were for atonement. It seems like there were other means available to them to deal with sin as they saw it. Now, we need to deal with some of the differences here. All right. First of all, in the Aztec religion, the gods didn't regularly take, the gods didn't take on human form and pay for the sins of humankind or the transgressions of their creatures. Whenever somebody puts a meme like this up, they make the assumption that the person that Jesus who is dying is not God. That's always like the first assumption, that Jesus is not God. The assumption is always there. Um, and so the gods in the Aztec religion do not offer to absorb the punishment for sin for their creatures at any time in any way. They just do not do that. And so that's already a difference, because their view of the gods is that the gods would never suffer for human beings. We are not going to end up seeing that. In Jesus's case, that's different. But do understand the assumption that the author is already making when he puts the meme up, which is just plain good apologetics. But there's more. How did the plan of salvation come into being? See, was this something that God the Father imposed on Jesus, in which he had no part in the decision? In other words, was there any volitional aspect in which the death of Jesus and the plan of salvation was indeed something that was decided upon, not imposed upon? I don't know if I'm making that clear. It's one thing for God to ask me to do something and I should obey him. It's another if I helped plan the thing with God that I'm going to end up doing. In the case of the Aztec religion, the most you could hope for is that the victim was doing it voluntarily, and that wasn't usually the case. But there's even more. Not only was Jesus God come in the flesh, but Jesus was in on the plan of salvation in eternity past. Jesus, as pre-existed God in conjunction with God the Father, planned his own sacrifice. Now think about that for a few minutes, for the sake of restitution. That's distinctly not the way I see paganism operating, and not the way I see the Aztec religion in particular operating. Now, where do I get the idea that Jesus and God the Father were agreed upon this? Now, at that time, he would have been God the Son. He would not have been incarnated. Do you understand that Jesus is the name of God the Son in his incarnation? That will help you in a lot of areas, because when being picked on by Islam or attacked by rabbinical Judaism, um, or something like this, we are not saying that Jesus the man pre-existed his own birth. What we are saying is God became a man and dwelt among us and died for sin. And there's an important doctrinal difference between the two. We are not making man God. That's the accusation of certain groups, including Rabbi Singer, by the way, who likes very much to say that you're making making God man. And that's not what we're doing. We're not doing that at all. That in no way is what we're doing. Where did I get the idea that Jesus was God the Son, was in on the plan of salvation, and God the Son was incarnated in the person of Jesus. Well, I'm going to just take as a matter of fact that God the Son was incarnated in Jesus rather than deal with the deity of Messiah this evening. But did God the Son have any part to play in this? Notice, therefore, these words that are real interesting. I have other sheep which are not of this fold. I also must bring them in. They will hear my voice, and there will be one flock and one shepherd. So far, so good, right? Therefore, the Father loves me. Why? Because I lay down my life that I can take it up again. Look at these words. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of myself. Jesus is not saying that God the Father required a human sacrifice and did human sacrifice by sacrificing the human man, Jesus. But what Jesus is literally saying is that nobody could have taken his life if he didn't lay his life down. Now, that isn't true of me, and that isn't true of any victim of Aztec sacrifice. There's no victim of Aztec sacrifice that could say, I take my life, I lay it down, uh, and so I could take it back up again. That is not Aztec sacrifice by any stretch of the imagination. Is that the way Aztec sacrifices worked? Jesus says very clearly that his life couldn't be taken from him if he had not gone ahead and laid that life down. So, let's look at some important points. Jesus' life was not taken. It was laid down voluntarily. We just covered that. God the Father's will was that Jesus indeed do so. Okay, so God the Father wanted this, but indeed, Jesus volunteers for the assignment. Do we understand that? Jesus isn't just doing something because he is fully in agreement with the Father in the person of God the Son before he was incarnated, and after in the person of Jesus, who is God the Son incarnated after his incarnation. Jesus had full permission to take his life again up, which means Jesus had permission to be resurrected, actually to resurrect him. How many of the Aztec sacrifice victims had permission? Well, first of all, had the right to lay their life down; it couldn't be taken from them, and then had the authority to take their lives up again. When they died permanently. When Jesus died, resurrection was in view. So the victims of pagan rituals have nothing to do with this. Who did the deed? Now, here's a difference. They're claiming that God the Father, uh, through his will, committed human sacrifice of somebody who may have volunteered for it at best. But who really crucified Jesus? I mean, did God send a lightning bolt and just kill him right there? I mean, how did this passion of Christ actually take place? Let's go to Acts 2:23 and 24. Him being delivered by the determined purpose and foreknowledge of God, you have taken with lawless hands and have crucified and put to death, whom God raised up, having loosed the pains of death, because it is not possible that he should be held by it. You is Peter's audience, and he's talking to, we want to be a little careful here, but he's speaking to a Jewish audience. Okay? And so in this case, he's pointing to the fact that the nation of Israel, in their rejection of him, turned him over for crucifixion. By the way, Israel had no power to crucify at all. And so Israel could not, they could sentence him, but he had to be taken to Pilate. They had no authority to crucify. By the way, so we just need to be clear about that. Sinful men were involved in Jesus's passion. God the Father did not directly take Jesus's life. Lawless men indeed turned him over, and actually Rome ended up carrying out the execution. Okay? Furthermore, unlike pagan, in particular the Aztec religion, individuals who were unbelieving and outside the faith took Jesus' life. And I hinted at that. But in the Aztec religion, it is the Aztecs themselves that are taking the life. In Christianity, it is sinful men being used as agents that take Jesus' life. So those men are still responsible. Now, that gets into human will and divine sovereignty and some of that stuff. And I'm not hinting at all to start that topic. The reality is, they, as responsible moral agents, took Jesus's life. God, that's different in the Aztec religion. It isn't the sun god directly coming down and taking the life of the victim. It is the Aztec individual that's taking it. So God is not the active agent of taking Jesus's life in the passion as far as being the direct cause. But in the Aztec religion, okay, the Aztecs are the direct cause. So to claim that God is doing human sacrifice is a little bit off, because God isn't the direct agent there. Whereas in the Aztec, the direct agent is the Aztec person. Um, well, I'm afraid this did not quite come the way I wanted it to, so we're just going to go with it. Um, but let's draw some conclusions here about differences. In the case of Jesus' death, it was God coming in human form. That is so important. See, that's why the deity of Christ and the incarnation are absolutely vital. Because otherwise, one, you have a mere human being dying for sin, which would never work. Two, you don't have God ever paying the penalty. So salvation is wrought by man. When we say salvation is wrought by God, we mean not only can't our works get us saved, but no human being who is merely a human being could provide that either. God himself has to step in. In the Aztec religion or pagan religions, the gods are appeased, but they never pay the penalty for sin. Zeus never pays the penalty for sin themselves. Jesus' act was an act of divine love, and we need to frame it that way. It is not merely an angry God being appeased. It is God's ultimate act of love. No pagan religion can ever make that claim. By the way, an interesting question for like Islam or Judaism would be, in what way is God, uh, in what way is salvation from the Lord, if I can in any way contribute to it through my works? I'm not getting into whether we respond to God before we're saved in unsaving ways. What I'm saying is, if my works did not get me saved and no other human being's works saved me, then salvation must be from God who provides it. In the Aztec or other religions, you have appeasement, but you don't have it as an act of love. It's not an act of love on the part of the deities in the Aztec religion. Jesus' death was voluntarily, and he didn't gain anything from it. Jesus didn't need anything from it. In the Aztec religion, even if it was for appeasing the gods and someone volunteered, to go ahead and die, it would be so they could gain something. If someone volunteered to die to get to heaven in the Aztec religion, they're still believing that they're earning their way to heaven. They're getting something for it. In Jesus' case, his death is voluntary, and he gained. There was not for his gain. He did not need to do this to gain anything. In fact, he is providing for humankind. Jesus, unlike pagan religions, was not sacrificing himself for advantage for himself. In the Aztec religion, at best, if someone was volunteering to gain heaven or even to appease sin, they're the beneficiaries of that. Jesus' death was for atonement. Now, that's debated in the Aztec religion. In some other religions, it sort of is. But in other religions, it's a matter of a fit of temper, which must be appeased. Now, I want you to see a difference here. God is not given to fits of temper. See, in pagan religions, I get the gods to do what I want, or I manipulate them not to do something to me. And in the case of not doing something to me, it's to appease their anger. Now you're saying, well, God gets angry too. Yes, but God's anger is of an entirely different sort. In the case of atonement, God's righteous law, which is built in the universe, has been violated and moral balance must be corrected because God must honor his own nature, not because he's had a momentary fit of anger. In other pagan religions, even the Aztec religion, there is a sense in which the gods maintain the cosmos is dependent upon the sacrifice. In other words, the sun god needs blood. In the case of Jesus' death, God needs nothing. Let's be very clear about this. Unlike any pagan religion that has ever existed, God needs absolutely nothing. He's totally self-sufficient. Therefore, anything that is given to God is given to God not because God needs it. God doesn't need anything. In the case of pagan deities, I'm either manipulating them to get something that I need, but in the case of like the Aztec religion, it's cosmologically necessary for blood to be shed so that the universe can keep working. In other words, the universe is a machine that works on, or the deities are running a machine that runs on blood and death. That's not true in Jesus' case. That's not true in Jesus' death. In no way and no how is that the case. So there aren't a lot of questions tonight, and I'm really sorry. I just upgraded, so I have better tools to do this because I know I'm, that the Lord has me doing this, and I believe I am called to teach, uh, but I'm unhappy with the fact that I just got better tools in one area, and yet we're still glitching in another. Um, we'll continue to work on this. It's been recent. My first broadcast streamed really well. And so I'm not quite sure. In the case of having guests on, I will just use Zoom directly probably to Facebook and then post afterwards because it doesn't seem that I can bridge the gap. Or I will just use Zoom to restream and do it that way. But I know one thing, don't try to combine OBS, at least on my computer right now with the settings with Zoom because it doesn't seem to be coordinating real well. Final analysis. The author of the Facebook post is wrong. He's making what's called a faulty comparison. The essential characteristics of paganism and the essential characteristics of Jesus' passion don't match, and that's what tells us he's making a false comparison. If you did not get the PowerPoint, please feel free to download it. There may be a few typos in it when it downloads, or you can wait and I can go back in and do some cleaning up if there are any typos or something looks funny. Thank you so much. As far as the PowerPoint, I'm going to go ahead and just go to my regular screen in OBS and go from there. And kind of work from there. And I'll close off the PowerPoint. Because of the quality of the broadcast, there may not be a lot of questions tonight. So I will indeed run the credits. And I want to, again, just acknowledge that one of the things I was able to do was to upgrade to Logos 9, which is an incredible upgrade. And everything tells me that this has not been a good night for live stream. Please join me tomorrow. We will work with Cox. We will continue to work it out. Usually Thursdays work better